Welcome to the Noir Poise podcast, where wisdom is power is more than just a motto.
It's our way of life. While we don't claim to have all the answers, we're dedicated to delving deeper into different topics through meaningful conversations. As a duo, we bring different viewpoints to the table, enriching our joint journey towards growth and poise.
Join us as we explore and unlearn to relearn while striving to navigate life with poise.
Have you ever wondered why men seem to be afraid of marriage or relationships?
I haven't wondered why. I feel like I kind of have an idea why.
And there's no right or wrong answer here, of course.
Yeah. In my opinion, I think men are just comfortable and afraid of commitment.
But why are they afraid of commitment?
Several reasons. I think some men want to be free to do what they want, whether that's have multiple women. Some men just want to be free to do what they want, just in a general way, not necessarily having multiple women. But if I think of like the couples that I know now, boyfriend, fiance, or husband's schedule is about 85% controlled by their woman. We just be putting things on y'all calendar and, we're going to this event. We're doing this on Friday. This is what we're doing next week. So I think ultimately it's probably freedom.
Yeah, you kind of hit the nail on the head. And this is not really my opinion. Well, it is my opinion, but I read a few articles that kind of suggested this as well. But men are afraid of losing themselves. And
It's
you
funny
kind of saying,
because it's the same for us, I feel like.
I would love to hear like from a woman's perspective why. But before, even you saying what you just said about women just be adding things to the calendar and all that stuff, I think those are little subtle examples of how men fear if I get into a relationship, I'm no longer going to have, like you would say, like my freedom to do whatever I want, whenever I want. There's always going to be something that I have to bounce off of.
Yeah.
And I can understand why that's the same case for a woman, but I feel like, I don't know if you'll agree, but for men it's a little bit more aggressive.
I think it depends on what it is. If we're talking about like scheduling your day-to-day habits, hobbies, whatever the case is, yeah, I can see that because I always say this to you. I feel like women tend to carry on legacy in the sense of you're following their traditions, you're following, the things that they did growing up, so on and so forth. Like families tend to do what the mom wants to do. And honestly, men are very like lenient for the most part. And I feel like you guys tend to be more adaptable than we are. And you'll see men when they're just like, yeah, she wants to do it, I'll do it.
Yeah.
Like whatever makes you happy. We're not really like that. It's kind of like, no, I want to be happy doing it most of the time. Not saying that I'm not willing to do what you want to do, but it wouldn't be the same if you were 85% controlling my schedule and all the men out there controlling women's schedule. But for women, I don't think it's necessarily about like freedom in that sense. It's more so freedom because our life becomes more selfless when you are in a relationship that you're building a family with. Like for you guys, it's more so like, okay, what you're doing day to day, you may be questioned about why you're sitting down and doing this or watching this when there's certain things in the house that needs to be done. I don't know, like random stuff like that. Whereas for women, you kind of have to schedule in order to find that freedom, if that makes sense. So women tend to have like girls' dates or meet up with their friends or loved ones to be able to get out of the house or get away from the family. Whereas men don't necessarily need that as often as women do. And I think it's because we lose our freedom because we're constantly nurturing, giving, thinking of your well-being, being the backbone, supporting, so on and so forth. So I think we both lose freedom to some extent. We just lose it in different ways.
as we're having this conversation, it made me think of how so many times I've heard women say this, how they they want to go after a man or they want a particular person, and already they're changing them. They're picturing how they're going to change them in little ways. You rarely hear that from men. Like when a man goes after a woman, you rarely hear him say, you know, I'm gonna fix her up, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna change her style, whatever the case is. They kind of take her for
Who
who
she
she
is.
is. So I wanted to ask you, what do you think that does to men psychologically or mentally when they're in a relationship and the woman is slowly but surely starting to change them?
I don't think you can change a man, period. But I do think a man can make the choice to change because he loves the woman. He's willing to adapt and shift where needed to accommodate her to some extent or make her happy. But I don't think you can change a man. I think that man is going to make that decision to change, or not even change, but more so evolve. Because I feel like I know what you're talking about when you make that statement, because I've said it personally. I've had friends say it, and it's never wanting to change a man, because I feel like that can easily be misconstrued if we say that statement and leave it at that, because there are women out there who literally will get into a relationship with a man who has terrible characteristics, who is not interested in being in a committed relationship, and they go in with the mentality that they're going to try to change that person. But I think in the aspect that you're talking about it's more so like, ah, I don't like the way he dressed. We gonna have to do a little
Right,
shopping,
little
get him where he's at.
subtle ways.
Yeah. So that, to me, that's not changing him. That's more so upgrading him. That's how I see it.
But an upgrade is a change. It's an upgrade.
Call it what you want. I think that's more so evolving and upgrading him. I'm not looking to change who you are. I'm looking to make you recognize your potential. Does that make sense?
That does make sense. And I'm glad you brought that point up because personally, and let me finish my statement before you react. All right. Personally, I think that within our relationship, I did lose myself, but I found a better version of myself. But there's a gap in between that. And I think what happens with a lot of men is when they transition from, I think I've lost myself, they never really find their way of, no, I found a better version of myself. Because there were a lot of things that you would say to me subtly, nothing major, of course,
Yeah.
that at the moment I didn't like.
Mm.
At the moment I did it, yes, because I did love you. But I think sometimes men just want peace. So
Yeah.
if a woman is saying, I don't like this, then
They're like, all right, let me
yeah,
just shut
man
you
is
up.
more like,
Yeah.
all right, whatever. Like it
Yeah.
could be in
I
the
get
most
that.
subtle ways. I can think about this episode from a show where a guy just got back into a relationship and she calls out and says, "Are you ready to go out?" And he's like, "Yeah, I am ready." And she looks at him and she says, "Are you wearing that shirt?" And he's kind of like, "All right, here we go. I was comfortable in this shirt, but now you're gonna make a big deal out of me wearing this shirt." Next thing I know,
Yeah, I get
you're
that.
taking me shopping. You're asking me to wear colors that I don't like wearing, but I'm gonna do it because I'm like, all right, whatever. So there's a transition from all right, whatever to oh no, I think I kind of like the way I look because there are a lot of things where, especially with fashion, where I used to love like the long shirts or anything long on me. I thought it would look cool, but you had to kindly and lovingly explain to
I'm
me
glad you
that
put kindly and lovingly before there, because I feel like I was very nice about it.
you were, but you explained to me how, because of my broad shoulders and shorter legs, there are certain things that just naturally won't go with me. And at the moment when you're telling me that, that doesn't go, I'm looking at the outfits like I like this outfit, but now you're making me change it. Now I transition to, oh snap, I like the way, I look now in these clothes. It's a transition period, and I think a lot of men don't know how to navigate through that.
I can see that. But ultimately, I just want to point out you confirmed that that's an upgrade.
Yeah, I didn't say it wasn't an upgrade.
Not even in
but
our situation, but just generally, like the examples you were giving, like, although, okay, you don't like the transition of it, but you clearly recognize that you've become a better version of yourself. But I do understand what you're trying to say as far as like there's a transitional period where at first no one wants to hear that something doesn't look right on them or what they've been doing their entire life. Now the person they love has a problem with it or is not a fan of it. But I think it's all about how the message is delivered. But I don't think women are really thinking that, to be honest with you. They're not thinking of him potentially feeling like he's losing part of who he is. She's probably looking at it like he looks nice. Who would it want to look nice? Or if it's any other aspect, I do believe that that's one of our gifts as women. Like I do believe that. I do think we have the power to upgrade men in the best ways possible. But it's all about how it's done, how the message is delivered, and making sure you're not scorning him in the process. But like I said earlier, I think men are just more adaptable. So I don't think it ever crosses women's mind. And even if it does, probably not to the extent that it would stop her from trying to improve him. Because in her mind, she's probably thinking, I'm helping him improve. Like, I see somewhere where you can do this better. Let me give you an idea. Not saying you must or you have to, but more so like, you have broad shoulders. These shirts really look great on you, rather than saying like, you got broad shoulders. Don't wear this and don't wear that, but not giving you like an alternate.
Right. I totally get that. But what I'm trying to get you to see is while the women may see it as an upgrade and even the man may start to end up liking whatever the change is, at the same time, there's an understanding that this is not who I was before.
Yeah.
So there's still that thought of I'm sort of losing myself. Mm-hmm. But earlier you said that women also share the same thing.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I personally did within our relationship. I don't know if that's the case for every woman, but I do think to some extent we do lose a part of ourselves. But it's similar where you're not losing the core of who you are, but you're evolving throughout the relationship. Because even if it's not a situation as simple as like attire or little changes like that, in general, there are certain experiences that you gain while being in a relationship that allows you to gain certain knowledge that will shift your way of thinking, shift your attitude, make you see things in a different light, because we're two different individuals. So now you're talking to someone, even if it's not an intimate relationship, if you're talking to someone in general all the time, like you're constantly spending time with them, you're constantly speaking to them, because you're two different people, there are certain experiences that you're going to have with that person and certain knowledge that you may gain through speaking with that person that's going to change the way that you think and see things. Because now it's not just about how you see it, your perspective, but you're understanding someone else's as well. So in relationships, I think generally, regardless if one is trying to change or improve the other, naturally, when you're with someone, you go from being single to being in a relationship, there is a part of you that is going to change, in my opinion, because you're two different people coming together and sharing experiences. And now you may notice things about yourself that don't work well with this person. So what do you have to do? Adapt, shift. So it may not be the same way like men experience it, like you're saying, but there are a lot of things that I could think of where I had to adapt emotionally and mentally to accommodate being with you. You know what I mean? That doesn't mean you're losing yourself. It's more so what you said earlier. You're kind of evolving into a new version of yourself and recognizing that, oh, I kind of like this new person or this new version of me. Not saying the old version of you is gone, but as time goes on in general, whether you're single or in a relationship, we should be evolving. So I think it's always going to happen. It's inevitable, in my opinion. And I think it's a good thing. But for me, the importance is not being so caught up and focused on the relationship that you lose sight of who you are. Because changing your attire or recognizing certain things emotionally and mentally, or starting to work out, or maybe not working out anymore, there are things like that that may occur while you're in a relationship, but that shouldn't change who you are. You know what I mean? You may pick up on certain habits, you may lose certain habits, but it shouldn't change who you are as an individual. It should evolve you, in my opinion.
As crazy as this may sound, I would have never thought in a million years that you had to adapt emotionally for me. And I think a lot of men would
Really?
think that. Yeah, because even when I did some reading on this, I saw that there were a list of things of how women would like their men to change, but the only the only change that men required for the most part was more physical intimacy. The emphasis is always on the man changing emotionally for the women, that I never thought that it could have been the other way around.
Absolutely.
So could you explain that a little bit? Like, how did you have to change emotionally for me?
Well, I mean, throughout the podcast episodes, I feel like we've kind of given like little examples of how I come from a more vocal background where I say what's on my mind, no matter how it comes out. At least that's how it started. And I had to learn within our relationship that I can't operate that way because you come from a completely different background. So there were certain things that I couldn't say to you or couldn't say to you the way that I would originally say it. So I had to adapt how I vocalized my emotions or how I felt about certain things, how I worded it, my choice of words. In general, I think things like that will occur when you're dealing with people. But even on a deeper level, like I'm an older child and I was also raised by a single mom for most of my life. So I feel like there were certain responsibilities that were put on me very early on that made me into who I am. There are certain things that like you wanted to do for me that I was looking at you sideways in the beginning, like I could do it myself. I don't need you to do it. That was actually a portion of my life that I had to adapt a lot, is stripping myself of the heavy independence type of attitude and learning to be codependent and a little bit more dependent of you in certain ways to allow you to lead me as my husband. So that was a big deal. We talked about that many times where there's certain things like, to me, it's not a big deal, but you look at it like, what is wrong with this girl? And that's an example of having to evolve or adapt emotionally or mentally. So emotional would be the example I gave about how I vocalized myself. There were certain ways I would probably express myself at home with my mom and sister that I can't do with you because it would kind of like break your ego a little bit. So I had to recognize like, okay, I have to vocalize myself in a way that's not going to make him feel less than who he is, especially as a man, because I've learned with men, even if what you're saying is the truth, there's just how do I word it? There's a way of swindling vocabulary so you guys don't feel less than. So that was definitely a lesson for me. I've had like cousins and stuff that I grew up around, but we've never had really in-depth conversations about genders and stuff like that that would help me understand how to speak to a man, to be honest with you. So I didn't learn a lot of that until I was dealing with you, where I was just like, oh, okay, I can't say this. Oh, I can't do this. Oh, I can't correct him in this way, kind of thing, like little things like that. And then again, the independent thing, I'm still dealing with that. Till this day, I stay at home now and it's a struggle for me to accept. We talk about it all the time where I'm just like, you sure you don't want me to get a job? You sure you don't want me to figure this thing out? So yeah, I think it's both ways. I think it's always just in different ways. And unfortunately, society doesn't talk about these kind of things.
That's why I love having these conversations with you, because it kind of pieces so many things together.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I would have never thought that you, for example, you spent your whole life, adult life, working, and now just recently you stopped working.
Right.
I never processed that as you're losing your individuality.
Yeah.
I never
Heavy.
really, that never crossed my mind. So even when you would make certain comments, in my mind, I'm like, what do I have to prove to her to show her, like, she could chill, she could relax a little bit. But in that context now, it makes total sense why you're uncomfortable with it.
Absolutely.
And
yeah,
it's always crazy to hear you break things down as far as interacting with a man emotionally, because it sounds like how a man would describe interacting with a woman emotionally.
Interesting.
And I'm not saying this like to try to downplay myself or anything like that, but it actually shows how, kind of like what you just said, how it's the same but it just looks a little different.
Yeah. I think that's usually the case with most things.
Because I know I felt the same way, where I wanted to say certain things to you, but I'm like, you know what, maybe now's not the right time, or I gotta be careful how I say this. And I never thought, well, it didn't cross my mind, I should say, that you would feel the same way, to the point where you have to actively think about, okay, this is not how I normally would want to say it, but I'm changing for him.
Yeah.
So it's so fascinating to just hear that and get a better understanding of how when two people come together, you really have to in some ways change in order to make it work.
Yeah, and I don't like to use the term change when it comes to stuff like that. I rather use evolve because I think sometimes the term change has like negative factors to it, whereas evolve illustrates that yeah, I may not be the exact same that I was when you met me, but I've grown and I'm better. And the same with you. Like that's what I view it as. I think when you're dealing with someone and it's the right person for you, it will encourage you to evolve. It will encourage you to challenge yourself to do better, be better in every way, shape, and form. Even if you're, like the song says, you're great by yourself, but together you're a force. And I think that's what it should do. So to some extent, you're always going to change. But that doesn't mean that you don't still have your individuality. Because I think being able to balance the two is very important. You don't want to be all about this person, this person, this person, and you no longer do the things that bring you joy, work on your goals. And for me, when I mentioned the whole independent thing, it's more so we hit a season where everything happened pretty rapidly, unexpectedly kind of thing. And then to add on to it, we became parents. So it was like trying to adapt to this new lifestyle while also becoming a parent and not even having the time to go out and try to be an individual. So everything we were doing had to do with like us, our family, our goals together, so on and so forth. And I think it's always important to make time for yourself because I think that's what happens in relationships, that sometimes we don't make that time for ourselves alone without that person. Sometimes we misunderstand what becoming one means and we think that we have to like the same things, do the same things, be interested in the same things, have the same goals. Like it's very possible to be with someone and you have a personal goal and I have a personal goal that's very different. It's all about finding a way to make sure it aligns towards our future goals as a team.
But how do you do that? Like, I like that you mentioned, finding time for yourself, like doing something you love alone. But to me, that sounds like you can't be an individual with the person. I'm trying to get a better understanding of, in your opinion, how could you keep your individuality while you're still in the surrounding or in the environment of your spouse or your loved one?
Well, I think it's all about just being comfortable in your identity in general, like being confident. So, being around you, I don't feel like I have to be someone else. I'm myself. I'm myself around you. And that's how it should be.
Like, there's certain things I'm not going to watch if you're around. Because if we're both there watching TV, like you said earlier, men are more adaptable. So we're more likely to find something that you like that I'll also watch too, versus something that I like that you'll also watch. That's just the first example.
I see what you're saying. I mean, I don't agree, but I see what you're saying because I think this has happened before where like I would walk into the room and then you'd be watching something and then within like 10 minutes you'll switch it to something that you think I like. And I'm like, I don't even want to watch TV, bro. You could keep watching and do what you're doing. I think it's all about being honest with the person that you're with and them respecting what it is that you like, what you want to do. Even in your togetherness while we're physically together, you can still do what you want to do. If there's something you want to watch or if there's a hobby that you have that you want to do while I'm in your presence, that should be okay because I'm aware of it and you should be able to be you and vice versa. With balancing individuality, the reason why I say having alone time is because realistically, at least for my sake, I'm a loner naturally. I like to be alone sometimes. But realistically, I feel like in order to keep your individuality, you do have to find that time to be by yourself sometimes. I mean, you could always be with the person all the time, but it's, in my opinion, I think it's healthier to find time to be alone, do things alone that you're into, so you still have that relationship with yourself. The same effort and the same time you put into being in a relationship with someone else, I think it's important to also do it with yourself. There's certain things that I used to do before we were a thing. And as soon as we became a thing, you were just like, why? Until this day, I haven't been able to really do it because of that. And that, in my opinion, is what I consider losing a little bit of your individuality. Like, I remember I used to go watch movies on my own. I'd go and take myself out to dinner and, that was my time to spend alone. I wanted to travel alone. And then when we got together, it was just like, travel alone? What? Like you just could not understand it. So till this day, I've never been out of the country on my own. I mean, I'm a mom now, so there's
Yeah, it's
clearly
too
no way
late for
it's
that. No, I'm
happening. Yeah, you were quick to say that. But for me, it's important that I find time to do things on my own, and not on my own in the sense of like, I'm going to go run the errands alone. I'm going to go do market alone. Oh, I'm cooking in the kitchen by myself today. There's no one with me. Like, that's not really alone time. And for me, I think in situations like that, it's easy to start to lose your individuality because you're not finding the time to spend alone. The same way they say in a relationship, keep dating your spouse, spend time with your spouse without the kids. I think it's honestly the same thing with yourself.
I love that. That's why, like I said, this is why I love having these conversations with you, because certain things that I knew of before, it didn't click for me. Right.
Yeah.
It didn't register like, oh snap. Me saying that was causing her or leading her to kind of lose herself. So I joke and say, it's too late now, but to travel alone. But
bro, you know damn well you meant that.
No, if the opportunity presents itself,
yeah,
because of this conversation, I will remember this.
Yeah,
I'll definitely
travel
be
alone
open to
with
this.
other friends and people, I'm sure.
No. Listen, if the opportunity presents itself, you know what? Because of this conversation, I think I will be open to it.
Y'all, I don't believe this man. We shall see, though.
But I love that you said, just like you're working on your relationship, work on your relationship with yourself.
Absolutely.
Because I think that's something that, at least from a man's point of view, you think that it's just over.
Yeah,
like you may get a little bit of breathing room, but for the most part, you're like, you know what, my single self is gone, kind of thing. When that's not the
sad.
case. Yeah.
No, it's not the case. It's not the case at all, in my opinion. I'm always going to say my opinion because I understand that the world has already made us believe certain things. So we walk around saying these things and not even having like facts or experiences to prove it. Right. I think if you're with the right person, anyone who loves you and respects who you are, if you express that there are certain hobbies or things that you would like to do for yourself on your own, I don't see why the person would have an issue with it unless it's a situation where times are hard, whether that's with time or money, or you know what I mean? But I don't see why the person would not want that for you, because relationships don't work if you're not working on yourself. So for me, when I think of those statements, I'm just like, it's not true. I feel like most women that I know who are in like committed relationships encourage their spouses to go spend time alone, go spend time with their friends, go do something that they like. But I think if I'm completely honest, I think it's something that you guys have created in your mind. Yeah. I think men have created that perception in their mind and they run with it. But most women want you to have alone time. You think they don't want to break from y'all? Like, go, please have fun and come back happy. You know what I mean? Like, most women who love the men that they're with, they want them to be able to have that joy the same way that they do. I think you guys think that it's over the minute you get married, when it's not the case, in my opinion.
You ever seen the memes where my wife or my girlfriend or whatever gets mad if I'm having fun without her?
Yes,
I think those are examples of the perception I think that we have in our mind that, yeah, she's telling me, yeah, fine, go ahead, go have fun, go do whatever, but she's gonna get me later, kind of thing.
I'm done.
And it's a false perception.
Who knows? Maybe that's the case with some people. That could be possible.
It could be, but I'm choosing to believe that's a false perception, because one of the things I also read is
timing too. Sorry. I had to cut you out in that part because I feel like I was going to forget. But I think it's all about timing. Because when I think of that meme, I think of like a guy chooses to go out on the wrong day. Like, you know what I mean? Like on a day when...
I'm shaking my head like, no, I don't know what you mean.
It could be a situation where, because let's be honest, I can't speak about every man, but I've witnessed men, you guys don't really look at all the details all the time. You're just like, all right, I'm doing this, cool. But you don't stop to think, oh, the kids have soccer practice today. Oh, this, that, and the third. Like, you guys don't really look at whole pictures all the time. So that's the only way that I could think of where she's like a little bit like annoyed that you're going somewhere, because it's just like, that out of all days this week, why today? You know what I mean? But continue.
I can sort of get that, but then again, the perception becomes, there's going to be something I overlooked. There's going to be a reason why. There's going to be a price to pay for this. And again, I'm choosing to believe that that's just a perception that we created or that we fostered. But I actually saw that one of the top reasons why men fear relationships or marriages is because they fear that they're not good enough.
Interesting.
Yeah, which would make sense why
Good enough in what way?
they
Like good enough to be a husband or good enough to be a father?
just good enough for both. Actually, I read that was for both, but I would summarize it as saying just good enough for the person that they're with. So there's always a fear in the back of their mind that if I don't
I
adapt or
see.
keep her happy or
She's
keep
gonna
her
find
happy,
someone else.
she's eventually going to find someone else because she's clearly upset with me. And remember how I think we discussed this in a previous episode, how men and women just think differently.
Yeah.
A woman could look at a man like and see that he's upset and know that it's just temporary or whatever the case is, while men may look at a woman and see that she's upset because of something he did, and it just hits a little different. And according to everything I've read, I don't remember the exact survey or data where I got it from, but men have that fear that I may not be good enough for the woman that I love. So I'm just
Interesting.
going to do whatever. We've heard the term happy wife, happy life. I'm going to do whatever it takes to keep her happy so that I can at least know that I'm happy.
Interesting. Because as you were saying it, the first thing that popped in my head, to be honest, and you mentioned this earlier, is physical intimacy. Because everything that you're saying about like how men may think so on and so forth, I'm realizing that we're all really experiencing the same emotions just in different ways.
Yeah.
Because I never once thought that men had that mindset. I would have never guessed it, to be honest with you. So maybe y'all marrying out of y'all league. I'm joking. I'm joking. No, but as you were saying it, I was like, oh, that's interesting because I think women have that fear when it comes to physical intimacy. And that's why she forces herself. At least that's what the world has taught us. Because if I'm completely honest, I don't know a bunch of situations to actually say, like, this is my experience, but I've seen it on TV. I've seen it in movies. I've heard it on different things where women are not as interested in physical intimacy as men are, or how many times they want to do it in most cases. So they tend to do more to keep their husband or significant other happy because they know if they keep him happy in that way, there's a high chance that he won't be looking elsewhere. So I find it so interesting that you just said pretty much the same exact thing, but pertaining to emotional aspects.
Right. That is interesting.
Yeah. But ultimately, with the whole happy wife, happy life thing, I do honestly think there's some form of truth to it. I think it's taken out of context a lot of times, but I do think there's truth to it. Similar to what I said earlier about women kind of leading in the sense of cultivating traditions and the things that the family does. Like the schedule is mainly, for the most part, done by the woman. Thanksgiving comes around, most of you guys are going to your mom's family house. You know what I mean? Like little things like that. You're probably closer to your mom's side of the family. And that tends to happen because when it comes to those things, the mom tends to take the lead on creating experiences for the family, whereas the man will do so in other ways. So I feel like because of that, I can understand the concept of happy wife, happy life. And I think that's why you guys maybe adapt more when it comes to like, I don't really want to go to this festival, but she said the kids are going to like it. It's going to be an experience. I'll go. You get to the festival, you having the time of your life, bro. Because I hear men say stuff like that, and I'm just like, you look like you had more fun than the kids. But point is, I do think there's some form of truth to it. I don't agree with just going along with things willy-nilly just for the sake of keeping her happy. I do think it's a two-way street. Just like I just mentioned, it may not be the same situations, but both individuals should be seeking to look for ways to keep the other person happy. And in doing so, you create a happy life together. And honestly, hearing everything that you said on this episode, it just confirms for me even more how much more similar we are than we are different. It may not be like the same exact situations or the same exact perspective about a situation, but ultimately it seems like everyone's going through the same type of emotions. And even with this topic of finding individuality while in your relationship, we all deal with it in different ways. I walked into this conversation thinking that I was going to say something to the extent of like finding beauty in our differences rather than trying to find similarities all the time. but clearly we are very similar. We're just not similar in our interests and what we want to do on a day-to-day basis. But when it comes to the internal situations, we are a lot more alike than we thought.
I think this conversation for me actually made me realize how important it is to always factor in what the person wants. And I think we do a good job at that, but we both suck in doing it for ourselves.
Yeah.
And by not doing it for ourselves, I think we actually put the burden on the other person.
That's deep. That's very true, because I think we focus so much on serving one another that we forget to serve ourselves.
Yeah.
That's a really powerful lesson in finding individuality within being together. It goes back to servicing yourself as well.
Yeah. Like kind of like what you said earlier, where you can't be your best self in a relationship if you're not taking care of yourself.
Right. Absolutely. Thank you for spending your time with us. We hope you gained some knowledge today that'll promote poise in your life. We have new episodes uploaded every Thursday right here, same place, same time. Until next time, you can follow us on Instagram at Noirpoise Podcast to stay connected. That's NOIRPOISED Podcast. We'd love to hear your feedback.
And remember, your wisdom is power.